Romans chapter 7, verse 1. Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth. Paul starts the verse 1 by saying, Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law. So one of the things that you know from that is that those that know the law would include Jews. So turn with me to Romans chapter 2, verse 17. Romans chapter 2 and verse 17. Behold, thou art called a Jew, and restest in the law, and makest thy boast of God. Notice verse 18, and knowest his will. Why do they know his will? And approvest the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law. So they know his will because they are instructed out of the law. Verse 19, and art confident that thou thyself art a guide of the blind, a light of them which are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, which hast the form of knowledge and of truth in the law. So in Romans 7:1, when Paul says, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, he's clearly including Jews in what he means in that verse, because they would know the law, because of course the law was given unto Israel. You know that from Romans 3, verse 1. So go back to Romans 7, if you would. In Romans chapter 7, verses 1 to 3, Paul is speaking to them that know the law. Now, I don't think that he's saying that Romans 7 doesn't apply to Gentiles. What he's doing is he's making a point that should be clear to all those that understand the Old Testament law, and he's going to spell it out specifically in verses 2 and 3. And the point that he's making, if you look at the second half of Romans 7, verse 1, how that the law hath dominion over a man as long as he liveth. That's his point, and that's a point that the Jews should understand, but the Gentiles should also understand. It's not a difficult point. So I'll just share with you sort of an obvious example. I once had a colleague, and he was working in the prosecutor's office, and there was a teen that was charged with speeding. And so it was the second or third appearance, I can't remember exactly, but the teen didn't show up at the hearing, and his mom did. And the mom said, well, actually, my son died in a car accident. And so he was cited for speeding, and he, subsequent to that, got in a car accident and died. Well, what was going to happen to him legally at that point? Were there any charges that they were going to try to bring against him? No, they dismissed them for the obvious reason that, sadly, the teen had died and was no longer under the jurisdiction of the law, right? They weren't going to try to do anything to his body at that point. And the point of this is simply this, the point that ought to be obvious. The applicability, the jurisdiction of the law ends at death. And that's the point that Paul's making in Romans 7 about the Old Testament law. Look with me at verse 2. Paul's going to give a specific example. For the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband, for how long? So long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. Look with me at 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 39. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 39. The wife is bound by the law as long as her husband liveth. But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the Lord. You're familiar, a common phrase that is used in wedding ceremonies is, till death do us part. When does marriage end in the Scriptures? It ends at death. Go back with me to Romans chapter 7 and verse 3. Romans 7, verse 3. So then, if, while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. Get with me, Mark chapter 10 and verse 11. Mark chapter 10 and verse 11. And he saith unto them, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her. And if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she committeth adultery. So what Romans 7:3 is summarizing is the Lord's description of how marriage works in the Gospels, which is when someone puts away their wife and marry another, it is considered adultery, according to Mark 10. And the same thing, if the woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she committeth adultery. And the point is that under the Old Testament law, what causes the marriage relationship to cease is death.